Guys, I just watched Dune Prophecy Episode 1, and I'm going to give you my full thoughts, reaction, and review, as well as some theories about that crazy ending. What the heck was that? So overall, you're probably wondering, is this show any good? How could it stand any chance of comparing to Denis Villeneuve's masterpieces of Dune and Dune Part 2? Is it just going to be a cash grab that's only going to be half as good? And I do worry that the upcoming Blade Runner series is definitely going to be that. Well, let me tell you, I don't know how they've done it, but this episode and this series so far feels like it 100% belongs in the world of those Dune movies, and that is a huge achievement in itself. I know it's a big thing to say, but I was absolutely blown away by the cinematography, set design, the visual effects. All of it just looks absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. For example, different shots of different planets, different settings. I just love how this show takes the time to immerse you in these establishing shots, and that means you feel immersed in the world of the show. It's something that's so refreshing. I feel like it doesn't get done in a lot of media these days, so it's so nice to just sit back on your couch at home and see this incredible scenery. It just looks so good. There's a bunch of trippy flash forwards, flashbacks, dream sequences, but they still give you that same sort of creepy and ethereal feeling that they do in the movies, but here in the TV show, they've got their own unique kind of flavor as well. I've always loved how they give you clues about what's to come in the movies, and here in the show, they function in the same way, but they're also equally as satisfying and epic. But onto the more important question though, which I'm sure you're thinking, how can this show be any good if it doesn't have any sandworms? Well, let me tell you, because this show does have sandworms. Let's freaking go, lads! Let's freaking go. And also there's a moment in the titles where Paul Atreides is mentioned, the Lisan Al Gaib. Let's freaking go, lads. Let's freaking go. The way that this episode just slots into the history and world building of the previous movies is done so well, especially considering that it's actually set 10,000 years before those movies. It's really satisfying to imagine what the world of Dune that we know could have looked like 10,000 years ago, but it still feels like kind of seamless and connected, which is really satisfying. The voice is also used in this episode as well, which was epic to see, as it always is. You might be thinking as well, is this just a bunch of empty fan service, just showing us a bunch of things that we love about Dune and hoping that we'll like this series as well? Well, I'm going to tell you the answer is no. I think it's done in a creative and tasteful way that doesn't feel on the nose. It just expands the lore in an epic and creative way. Now, I haven't read the Dune books, but from my perspective, as a big fan of the recent movies, it really feels like they respect the source material, and that is important. Now, just back on the voice, recently I've actually been trying to practice it myself, so I'm just going to test it right now.
If you're enjoying this review, you will subscribe.
Anyway, back to the show. So before we get into the plot intricacies, I just want to cover off a bit more about the world building and the feel of the show. Overall, it's really good. Some minor issues that I did have just stem around this one scene where two characters go to a nightclub, and I just could not picture Paul Atreides or Chani having a drink in this place.
So go back to the club.
It just seemed quite out of place and felt like a bit of an attempt to make the show a little bit trendy, a little bit cool. But that being said, the rest of the settings, the technology, it's done incredibly well. So it's a bit of a nitpick, and because of how good everything else is, I'm pretty happy to overlook that. The only other thing was the shield technology, which appeared in another duel scene. It just looked a little bit more goofy, kind of not as practical and real, but at the same time, you could almost justify that because, again, this is set 10,000 years before the Dune movies that we've watched. So the technology, you know, might change a bit in that time. So again, it's something that you can respect, and it's nitpicking because overall, I think they just absolutely nail the whole world of Dune, all the tech and just the general feel of it. Another complaint that some people might come out with against this show is that,
It's Dune going woke.
Oh, it's too much diversity.
etc., etc. If you see anyone saying this about this show, I really think you need to look past them, ignore or think twice about their overall criticism of the show. Because regardless of your thoughts on that stuff, I know there's some wide-ranging views on all of that. The story here is actually done really, really well. You can tell even just from this first episode that so much care has gone into this show. The creators actually care about telling a good story and the overall source material. They're not just being tokenistic. So for me, the diversity aspects don't feel on the nose at all. I think it actually fits the universe really well, and I think it's quite commendable in the way that they've done it. I've always said diversity and representation in media is great, but the most important thing is whether the story in the movie or TV show is actually good. And in this case, it seems like it actually is. And that actually works better for diversity and representation as well, because instead of people picking apart the show, hating on it, people love it, more people want to watch the show. It means that diverse cast gets a bigger and bigger platform, and it's a win-win for everyone. And I think that's something great to aim for, and so far, I think we're getting it with this series. And speaking of that, I already think the casting choices are phenomenal, and they already seem to be living up to their potential in this first episode. Emily Watson as Valya Harkonnen, the leader of the Bene Gesserit, she's great. Mark Strong is such a legend, and I always love watching him on screen. And also, he just seems to really suit this role. Sort of in the same vein as Oscar Isaac as Paul Atreides. Olivia Williams, for some reason, I just find her so likable. I think she's a great actress, and her performance at the end of this movie called The Father with Anthony Hopkins has always stuck with me. If you have a chance to check out that movie, guys, I highly, highly recommend it. Travis Fimmel also has a great presence on screen. I haven't watched him in Vikings, but even just looking at him, you can tell that he brings something mysterious and eerie, a real sense of intrigue, and we'll talk a little bit more about his character in a second. Fun fact as well, I actually watched this first episode with my girlfriend who's from Chile, and she pointed out something a bit funny about the character played by Olivia Williams, who's called Tula. Sorry to wreck it for you guys, but apparently in Chile they use the word Tula to refer to I'm gonna let the screenshot do the talking, but yeah, it might be hard to look at that character the same way for the rest of the series. The episode starts off by explaining through flashback about a war set about 100 years ago that humans had with the thinking machines, which seem like they're a form of AI. Once the humans were able to defeat them, that kind of technology was banned, and I just love how relevant that sort of story in the Dune universe is to our world today. Because, I mean, you've got some crazy AI stuff going on. The potential of AI is so dangerous, so I think that just adds another layer to this series that just makes it so relevant. Judging by the first episode of this series, it looks like the return of that AI technology might be the big villain of the series or somehow connected to that. And again, I just think it's perfect timing. It's clever writing, and it just works really well with the times that we're living in now. Okay, so some major spoilers now, guys. So in this episode, we see the daughter of Emperor Javicco of House Corrino, which is played by Mark Strong. She's been promised as a wife to this 9-year-old kid, and the reason why that whole thing is happening is because the house that kid is from is going to provide these fighters to House Corrino, because House Corrino is currently in charge of the spice harvesting on Arrakis. They're getting destroyed by the Fremen, so they're pretty desperate for some help with getting control back over their spice harvesting. Sort of a similar premise to when the Atreides have control of Arrakis in the first Dune movie. It was pretty weird to see the marriage traditions between a 9-year-old kid and a fully grown woman, and at the end of that whole kind of wedding tradition sequence, it's revealed that the kid actually has a lizard which is powered by this thinking machine AI technology that was banned. which, by the way, House Corrino apparently played a big role in defeating in those huge wars 100 years before the show was set. So Desmond Hart, played by that guy in Vikings, he was sort of like a soldier or like a spice collector for House Corrino. He finds this 9-year-old kid sitting in a corridor by himself and appears to use some kind of psychic ability to burn the kid alive. And look, this kid, he was a bit of a stuck-up brat, but I've never seen a show or a movie be brave enough to kill a kid on screen in such a brutal way. You see him screaming for mercy, and also at the same time, the Corrino truthsayer, the woman who's part of the Bene Gesserit for Corrino House, she's burning up at the same time, but she's so far away on a different planet, but it somehow seems to be connected to the fate of this kid, or somehow Desmond Hart is also using his powers to kill her as well. It's hinted through earlier dialogue in the episode by Desmond Hart that this could be through some kind of power of the gods, but it's a bit unclear what that could mean in the context of the Dune universe. Mark Strong's character Emperor Javicco discovers a hologram recording which appears to show Desmond Hart actually getting eaten by a sandworm in the desert, so it seems like he might have been resurrected by some kind of powerful entity. Is it some kind of god? Is it related to the Lisan al-Gaib? I don't know, guys, but something strange is going on, and I love that whole plot thread. It was such a cool way to end the episode. I'm sure that this is probably explained in the books, but for now, it's just so great to be swept up in the mystery and intrigue of the show. It's my prediction that somehow Desmond is like controlled by some kind of entity that wants to release the AI technology to wreak havoc on the Imperium, or something to do with that. Somehow, I think Desmond is also connected to that banned AI thinking machine tech. Let me know in the comments what your theories are, guys. I'm really keen to hear. To answer your question, I'd say this episode was good. You know what? I'd probably say that this episode is great. I'm just so hyped to finally be covering a series or a movie that's actually good. I'm so pumped. So with all that in mind, guys, I'm going to give this episode 4 out of 5, and that rating could definitely go up if it all kind of comes together across the series for a really satisfying conclusion. Because that kind of thing, you know, this episode, it's pretty enough to look at. I'd definitely go back and watch it. Like, it looked so good. So anyway, guys, let's freaking go, because Dune is alive. What a time to be alive, guys. I'm so happy. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next one.